What's going on, guys? Macaulay here. What up? Alright, so it seems like this is going to last a little longer than we thought it was going to last. So, I guess we are going to continue to work on our stuff, especially Into the Wild. We will finish it one day. But in order to not overwhelm you guys and stuff, we will probably only be reading a couple of chapters a week instead of like 3 or 4 or something like that, like we would do in class. Oh my God, I need a beard trim so bad. Everything's closed. I'll be all right. Okay, so let's just get right into it. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read chapter 9 to you, like on this, obviously. And then I'll want you guys to read chapter 10 on your own. So let's see what's going on with this crazy McCandless kid. What was going on in chapter 8? I forgot. Let me look. Oh, that's when he's talking about Everett Roos and stuff. Yeah. It is actually really cool that he threw in all these stories of other people. I think one of the reasons that he does that is so you could see that Chris wasn't a nut. Some of the other people that have seemingly been compared to Chris were a little bit like the mayor of Hippie Cove or that McCunn guy. They're all a little out there. So, all right, let's just get into chapter 9. As to when I shall see or visit civilization, it will not be soon. I think I am not tired of the wilderness. I rather enjoy its beauty and the vagrant life that I lead, more keenly all the time. I prefer the saddle to the streetcar, and the star-sprinkled roof or sky to the roof, the obscure and difficult trail leading into the unknown, to any paved highway, and the deep peace of the wild to where the disconnect, bred by cities, I had to make it bigger because I'm blind, bred by cities. Do you blame me then for staying here, where I feel that I belong and I am one with the world around me? Is it true that I miss intelligent companionship? Or it is true that I miss intelligent companionship? I haven't read out loud in a while, you can tell. But there are so few with whom I shared the things that mean so much to me that I have learned to contain myself. It is enough that I am surrounded with beauty. Even from your scant description, I know that I cannot bear the routine of the humdrum life that you were forced to lead. I don't think I could ever settle down. I have known too much of the depths of life already, and I would prefer anything to an anticlimax. This is the last letter received from Everett Roos to his brother Waldo, and this is on November 11, 1934. What Roos was after was beauty, and he conceived beauty in pretty romantic terms. We might be inclined to laugh at the extravagance of his beauty worship if he were not something almost magnificent in its single-minded dedication to it. Aesthetics, as a parlor affection, is ludicrous and sometimes a little obscene. As a way of life, it is sometimes and attains dignity. If we laugh at Everett Roos, we shall laugh at John Muir, because there was little difference between them except age. And that was from Wallace Stenger on Mormon Country. Oh, by the way, look at that. Where'd she go? There she is. Charlie! Hey! Say hi to my students. Get a little stretch in. We're getting ready to read chapter 9. Are you going to join us? She might join us. I don't know. Oh, ignore all that stuff that was on the buffet. Anyway. So let's see who Everett Roos actually was. There's my espresso machine. I love that thing. Okay. Davis Creek is only a trickle during most of the year, and sometimes not even that. Originating at the foot of a high rock battlement known as the 50-Mile Point, the stream flows just 4 miles across the pink sandstone slabs of southern Utah before surrendering its modest waters to Lake Powell, the giant reservoir that stretches 190 miles above Glen Canyon Dam. Davis Gulch is a small watershed by any measure, but a lovely one. And travelers through this dry, hard country have for centuries relied on the oasis that exists at the bottom of the slot-like defile. Eerie 900-year-old petroglyphs and pictographs decorate its sheer walls. Crumbling stone dwellings of the long-vanished Kayenta Anazi, the creators of this art rock, nestle in protective nooks. Ancient Anazi potsherds mingle in the sand with rusty tin cans discarded from the turn-of-the-century stockmen who grazed and watered their animals in the canyon. For most of its short length, Davis Gulch exists as a deep, twisting gash in the slick rock, narrow enough to in places to spit across, lined by overhanging sandstone walls that bar across to the canyon floor. There is a hidden route into the gulch and its lower end, however, just upstream from where Davis Creek flows into Lake Powell. A natural ramp zigzags down the canyon's west rim, not far above the creek bottom that the ramp ends, and a crude staircase appears, chiseled into the soft sandstone by Mormon cattlemen nearly a century ago. I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate taking digs at you guys, but it's hard because you're not sitting in front of me. I'm going to say something. And if you guys ever say I said it, I'll deny it. I kind of miss you. Man, my beard is just gray and crazy. But anyway, back to chapter 9. The country surrounding Davis Gulch is a desiccated expanse of bald rock and brick red sand. Vegetation is lean. Shade from the withering sun is virtually non-existent. To descend into the confines of the canyon, however, is to arrive in another world. Cottonwoods lean gracefully over drifts of flowering prickly pear. Tall grasses sway in the breeze. The ephemeral, I think. Ephemeral? Let's look it up real quick. What do you say? It'll be just like class. Let's look up how to pronounce a word. Ephemeral pronunciation. There we go. And I'll turn my computer up so you guys can hear it. And let's give her a shot.
Ephemeral.
Ephemeral. I was saying it way wrong. Ephemeral. Let's go back and try it again. Ephemeral. Ephemeral. Okay. Oh, anyway. Where'd it go? See, this is when I need you guys, because you always tell me where I was. There it is. I forgot how to pronounce it again.
Ephemeral.
Okay. The ephemeral bloom of the seagull lily peaks from the toe of a 90-foot stone arch, and the canyon wrens call back and forth in plaintive tones from the thatch of scrub oak. High above the creek, a spring seeps from the cliff face, irrigating a growth of moss and maidenhair fern that hangs from the rock in lush green mats. 6 decades ago, in this enchanting hideaway, less than a mile downstream from the Mormon steps meet the floor of the gulch, 20-year-old Everett Roos carved his nom de plume, his name, into the canyon wall below a panel of Anasazi pictographs. And he did so in the doorway of a small masonry structure built by the Anasazi for storing grain. Nemo, 1934, he scrawled, no doubt moved by the same impulse that compelled Chris McCandless to inscribe Alexander Supertramp, May 1992, on the wall of the Shoshana bus, an impulse not so different, perhaps, from which inspired the Anasazi to embellish their rock with their own now indecipherable symbols. In any case, shortly after Roos carved his mark onto the sandstone, he departed Davis Gulch and mysteriously disappeared, apparently by design. An extensive search shed no light on his whereabouts. He was simply gone, swallowed whole by the desert. 60 years later, we still know next to nothing about what became of him. Everett was born in Oakland, California in 1914, the younger of 2 sons raised by Christopher and Stella Roos. Christopher, a graduate of Harvard Divinity School, was a poet, a philosopher, and a Unitarian minister, although he earned his keep as a bureaucrat in the California penal system. Stella was a headstrong woman with bohemian tastes and driving artistic ambitions. For both herself and her kin, she was self-published a literary journal, the Roos Quartet, the cover of which was emblazoned with the family maxim, glorify the hour. A tight-knit bunch, the Rooses were also a nomadic family, moving from Oakland to Fresno to Los Angeles to Boston to Brooklyn to New Jersey to Indiana before finally settling in Southern California when Everett was 14. In Los Angeles, Everett attended the Otis Art School of Hollywood High. As a 16-year-old, he embarked on his first long solo trip, spending the summer of 1930 hitchhiking and trekking through Yosemite and Big Sur, ultimately winding up in Carmel. 2 days after arriving in the latter community, he brazenly knocked on the door of Edward Weston, who was sufficiently charmed by the overwrought young man to humor him. Over the next 2 months, the eminent photographer encouraged the boy's uneven but promising efforts at painting and block printing, and permitted Roos to hang around his studio with his own sons, Neil and Cole. By the way, let's talk about this Edward Weston guy. I want to tell you guys about him real quick. Let me look him up to make sure I'm right. Okay. Yeah, I was right. Edward Weston was a really, really famous nature photographer, which is obviously why Roos would have been attracted to him. Not physically, but like attracted, like to want to talk to him. Because Roos was so infatuated with nature too. He had this, well, like the guy said in the foreword of this chapter, an obsession. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. And you could describe, every time I hit the table, it shakes the camera. You could describe McCandless like that too. I think McCandless, how can I say it? McCandless was obsessed with the people he admired and the desire to be like them and to live out what they said every person should do. With like Thoreau and Tolstoy, Thoreau very much talked about the power of celibacy. He very much talked about the power of nature. So did Emerson. Tolstoy, how can I say it? Tolstoy was a giant liar. He told people to live these ways, but he never lived that way. It's like Jack London. Jack London wrote all this stuff about taming the Yukon and being out in the Yukon. And he spent 6 weeks there of his entire life. And he ended up drinking himself basically to death, and he killed himself. But what's scary about that is McCandless idolized these guys, but these guys weren't who they seemed to be, except for Thoreau. And even Thoreau, to a certain extent, wasn't. When we were talking and reading about Walden Pond, it said, like, Thoreau talks several times about how he was out there for a couple of years, but Thoreau also came into town quite often and had dinner with people and did socializing. He didn't completely isolate himself like he said he wanted to. Did he isolate himself more than others? Sure. But Chris is idolizing these people the same way that Roos is right now, that didn't really live the way they said you should live. So, basically, they were hypocrites. Another thing I was going to tell you guys before we keep going is I'll probably stop this at about 20 minutes and do a part 2 video, because when I do like half an hour or 45-minute long ones, it takes forever for it to download, and I have to do my other classes right now. So we'll stop here in about 3 or 4 minutes. Plus, I kind of want a cup of coffee. Yeah. All right. At the end of the summer, Everett, remember, he just showed up at, God, no, I can't even remember, Edward Weston's house. At the end of the summer, Everett returned home, only long enough to earn a high school diploma, which he received in January 1931. Less than a month later, he was on the road again, tramping alone through the canyon lands west of Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico, and then a region as sparsely populated and wrapped as mystique as Alaska is today. Basically, back then in the West, it was pretty much the Wild West still. It started to change during the turn of the 20th century, but in like the 1930s, like this said, hardly anybody lived in Utah and Arizona and all these places because it was so inhabitable. It was a desert. Lands issue near... Okay. Except for a short, unhappy stint at UCLA, he dropped out after a single semester to his father's lasting dismay. 2 extended visits with his parents in a winter in San Francisco, where he insinuated himself into the company of Dorothea Lange, Ansel Adams, and the painter Maynard Dixon. All these people, especially Ansel Adams, all these people are very, very heavily into nature and stuff. Ansel Adams is probably one of the most famous nature photographers ever. I'm pretty sure that's who I'm thinking of. I don't think he took photography. I think he painted nature. Let's look him up real quick. And then we'll take a break and I'll come back. No, he was a photographer. But he was a landscape photographer that is so incredibly famous. Here, I'll show you guys some pictures of him. And some of his pictures. Yeah, like I'm looking at stuff right now. It's like, oh, shop for Ansel Adams photography. Oh, do you want a picture of Yosemite? $300. From a guy that's been dead for probably 80 years. But here, I'll show you Ansel Adams real quick. There he is. I don't know if you could see him or not because it's in selfie mode. But that's him. Very famous photographer of landscapes. Look at some of the incredible pictures he took back then. I mean, that is unbelievable. Ooh, that one's really pretty. Okay. And we're back. Where'd Charlie go? Charlie! Charlie, we're going to take a break. Say bye for a second. Say bye. Where'd you go? I can't. There you go. Bye, Charlie. Psst, I'm wearing PJ pants too. I have my real pants on. Okay, so I am going to be right back. I'm going to make some coffee and then we'll finish reading this chapter. Be right back. Stay tuned for part 2.